Hello, Regina again. This is episode 6 of Let's Get Real About Racism, and I've titled it Healing the Divide. And in my book called Racism, the Real Reason I Left the South, I talk a lot about this and the invisible line that so many of us are afraid to cross. I'm going to begin today's session talking about the positive things that have happened this week, because for those of us on the ground, particularly in cities where there are protests and a lot of violence is happening, it's been super intense, it's been scary. And one point I want to make is, if you live in one of these towns, if you've had the thought, what if this comes into my home? What if somebody breaks into my home? What if they hurt my children? This is out of control. This is scary. I want you to understand as a white person that that is what Black people live with every day in America. And it's a hellish experience. And we have turned away from that for far too long. So that's part of the progress that we're making right now, is recognizing that that is a reality for them and doing what we can to change it. With everything that's happened this week, so many videos I've had to turn away from in horror, because protesters who were not rioting or being violent in any way have been shot with rubber bullets in their face. And I learned for the first time far more than I want to know about how such situations are handled. Rubber bullets are supposed to be shot at the ground into a crowd to sort of dissipate that crowd, and that's not what's happening. Law enforcement have been using them in very violent methods. So I think all of us are repulsed by what we're seeing, scared by the experience overall, and want to move toward positive change. Call me an optimist, but that's where I'm at. So a few things I want to share that I consider progress are the Minnesota Police Department. The City Council voted on dismantling what they have currently and overhauling a new public safety and emergency response system. Now, I know that the idea of overhauling a police department scares a lot of folks. Oh my God, we're not going to have a police department. But I don't think that's what they're saying here. From what I've read, I'm understanding that they're trying to change the culture of police enforcement, which is what we need to be doing. Now, my concern here is that so many years ago, when we were using racial profiling, and then all of a sudden police departments were ordered to stop doing that. So they would give that verbiage to the public. We no longer use that. I think most of us are really aware that you can't change culture just by making an announcement. And it really didn't happen. I feel, from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, most police departments still implement that. And as I stated last week, the reason why I know that is because driving down the road, whether I'm in a city or a neighborhood, the mass majority of people that I see pulled over are Black or Hispanic. And I do feel that our Black and Hispanic communities are still being targeted unfairly and unjustly. So if you want to change the culture in a police department, how do you go about doing that? Even if you hired new, younger, fresh, more optimistic police officers, if you have those in authority, those that have been there for a decade or 20 years, still on the police department, guess what they're going to do when they take those newbies out? Don't listen to what they're telling you. This is our culture. This is what we do. I don't have an answer for you in how we really fully overhaul that, but we did get a response this week in that regard. I loved that all of our past presidents sort of publicly spoke out about what's happening right now in an affirmative way. President Obama did a public speech, and he implemented a call to action for police departments to make an overhaul in 8 areas. And that's the amount of force they're able to use, their response to emergency situations, It was all laid out. And if you follow social media, you're probably seeing what those 8 points are. And he said, I believe they're going through change.org to implement this. So they're challenging every mayor across the country to consciously look at their police enforcement and how they're responding to these so that they can curb negative, more violent behavior. They have 90 days to respond and take action. And if they don't, the public will then have this list of who did what changes were made in each city, and who is ignoring the call to action. I thought that was brilliant. I was very proud of that. And I think that that's what led to the Minnesota Police Department City Council voting to create change. Now, of course, their immediate response is, yes, we're going to implement this, but it could take a year. And that's very scary for those of us on the ground who don't have any influence and already feel like things are bordering on a revolution. But I want to give you some assurance today. We are living through a revolution. It is something to be proud of. It is something to, in your own way, as you are comfortable, participate in. Because I'm seeing more change now than at any time through history. And I am a historian, so I have studied this to some extent. Don't know everything and learning new things every day. But we're on our way. And a change is going to come. So additional comments from our past presidents who spoke affirmatively of the situation was President Carter, who we all know to be a longtime humanitarian. If you've never read any of his books, he has several, and his message is just beautiful. He was from Georgia, as am I, and is just a Christian man who still teaches Sunday school to this day. A lovely heart and beautiful mind. His comment was, dehumanizing people debases us all. And I want to take a moment to expound on this because I touched on it in my book as well. I don't think we realize, as white folks, our inactions or our ignorance further subjugates the Black community and prevents them from being all that they can be. When you add on top of that the police department that often harasses our Black community, when you add on top of that higher education that is telling our Black students that they can't do that there's no future there for them. And these stories are rampant. You have an entire community that could be our Black geniuses. There's a book out titled Black Geniuses that we have plenty of, that have been either held back completely or used and their name given no voice, no public affirmation or acknowledgement. That's how we limit our society. That's why we are not as great as we could be. That's why we're not united. That's why we're not the best, the strongest world leader anymore. We're limiting ourselves in all of our genius and all of our capabilities, whether we are consciously or subconsciously subjugating this community. So I loved his comment there. President Bush said it's time for America to examine our tragic failures. I found that very powerful. What I'm learning through all of this is how important self-examination is. I think that white folks don't address this because they're not comfortable with it, because it embarrasses them, because it's shameful, because they know that racism is wrong. But when it comes to looking at the ways that culture has trained us to be, we realize that we have been inadvertently participating in the subjugation of our Black community, and it's overwhelming. But we have to give ourselves permission and space to do the work, because we are not going to get through it any other way. I want to say that again. We as white folks have to give ourselves permission to retrain our brains, to unravel what we have learned, build the bridge to the Black community, start having those genuine, sincere wonderful, harmonious relationships and healing the divide. So, Bush got a thumbs up from me. Major brownie point. Former President Clinton challenged all of us to ask ourselves the hard questions, which further supports what I was just saying. How are we participating in the subjugation of the Black community and racism overall? I have learned so much about myself in exploring this. And there are moments where I'm getting emotional now. I'm just filled with so much intense anguish and frustration and anger over how my life participated in this, that it feels too much to bear, and yet I know that I have to push through that to help heal the divide. I have a girlfriend here in Vegas who is also a fellow author and an incredible person. And on Facebook today, I retweeted a sort of poem, if you will, that she wrote in 2016. And she recorded audio for it. And so I listened to it, and I could hear the frustration and anger in her tone as she spoke her truth. And as she talked about how she's been affected by this and how we fail to see our Black community. In our attempt not to see color, we negate their horrific experience. And in negating their Blackness, we don't see them fully. We're certainly not celebrating them fully, nor are we embracing them fully. And so I listened to her, and my heart is moved. And I'm like, I've been guilty with her, you know? Her name is Kalila. And we've known each other for several years. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to learn to pronounce her name right. And I gave her the excuse. I think I was saying Kalila. She was like, it's Kalila. And I was like, okay, maybe my subconscious doesn't want to associate lie with your name because you're too pure, which is, you know, a BS excuse, right? It's not acknowledging her and her history and her beauty, you know? So as I'm learning and growing through all of this and having those embarrassing moments and those emotional moments and all that I'm experiencing, I'm also proud of the fact that I'm getting there, that I'm getting better, that my efforts are helping to heal the divide. And I just want to say thank you to her and any of my Black friends who've been patient with me and who have not pushed me probably as hard as they should have, and have given me room to learn and grow in my own way, in my own time, and for seeing that my intention was good. God bless you, you know. If it wasn't for Kalila, I don't think my book would have ever come to be, because I had so many feelings of fear and angst about the work. And she just made this one claim to me that haunted me for over a year. She said, until people who look like you speak out about racism, nothing is ever going to change. It haunted me. And the book is dedicated to her as a result. I'm going to dedicate today's episode to her as well. I love and respect her so much, and just beg her to continue to be patient with me in those moments where I'm not quite getting it, and love me through it, and I will get it. And that's what we have to do in all of this, you know? We have to find someone that we can relate to in some way and work through the unknown together. I had been reminded over this past week, as I was thinking about this episode, of a story I'd heard many years ago of a Black man who had through his friendship with a wizard of the KKK, got him to leave the Klan. And I thought that was so incredible. And as I was seeing all these social media posts and videos of all the violence that was going on and, the police brutality, it makes you feel hopeless. It makes you feel like nothing is ever going to change. We're not going to get past this. It's too ingrained in our subconscious minds. And this man's story kept popping up to me. And then yesterday, on my YouTube feed, a video of him giving a TED Talk about it popped up. And his name was, I believe it was David Daniels. And his just humble spirit of why he befriended this man. Because he needed to understand the Klan and where they were coming from. And how their patience with each other and their respect for each other grew year after year until they were able to visit each other's homes, which was a huge deal. Until they could say in public, I have a friendship with this person that I don't necessarily agree with everything they understand, they say. I don't understand always where they're coming from, but I'm closing the divide. I'm crossing the invisible line. I'm doing my part to heal this. And they both came out of it. I mean, I'm just so blown away that a wizard left the Klan. Are you moved by that? Because you should be. That's incredible. I'm from the South. If you have any experience with how deep people believe in racism and that Black folks are subordinate to them and less than, for that to happen was absolutely incredible. And so I'm leaving you with that because I want you to get and understand that this is not impossible, that it's going to take work, it's going to take self-reflection, but we can do this, and we are doing this. We are doing it. I touched in the first few episodes on the police murder of Mrs. Breonna Taylor in her home. And since then, in Louisville, Kentucky, the chief of police has been relieved of his duties and a new chief of police has been implemented. I am hopeful that an overhaul of that police enforcement or police department is going to happen. Things are happening, things are changing. I woke up this morning to this beautiful picture of on 16th Street leading up to Lafayette Park in front of the White House. Gorgeous. Yellow gold letters, Black Lives Matter. And the mayor of DC has ordained that stretch of the street as Black Lives Matter Plaza in honor of all the protests and what we're going through right now. We can do this. We can change the system and we can change our minds if we're willing to do the work. If it intimidates you, be scared enough by a revolution that you step out of your comfort zone, because that's what needs to happen. All right, join me in the good fight. I'll see you soon for episode 7.